Gurmagat Gihirlach, and thank you, Minister, for coming in this morning. I think anybody watching in will be disappointed that the Minister for Education herself isn't here, but I understand that she's not in the House because she is participating in the talks to try and finalise arrangements for the Leaving Cert. Minister, you know, from the start of the pandemic, we're almost a year in. It's the 15th of February now, and government did prioritise protecting lives and livelihoods. And in allocating €9 billion in the budget for education, I do think it indicated a strong priority from government to invest in both children and their education. For young people, this is it has been a really stressful year. In the country, we have had obviously 12 months of a pandemic, but for young people, they have been living with the pandemic in a way that I suppose us as adults live differently. Young people within their own families have obviously had to deal with the impact of the infection. More than 200,000 people have been infected. They have had to live with the impact of a loss of income and employment for their parents. They've had to live with the changed circumstances of trying to be educated remotely. I accept that there has been an improvement in this lockdown from the previous one in terms of the delivery of remote teaching. However, remote teaching is no substitute for classroom learning. And I think you would agree with that. You're a young man yourself, and Minister, you did very well in education. You're a graduate of Trinity College, and you also hold degrees from overseas. So I think you understand the value of education. You understand how important the Leaving Cert is for young people. And for this class of 2021, they have lost 5 months of their senior cycle. They have been denied the support, the emotional, the social support of being in classrooms, being in their school. They have been struggling to connect with broadband, with oversubscribed broadband in many households because you have parents trying to work as well as other siblings. Many of the Leaving Cert subjects, you will be aware, have practical components to them. They have been denied that opportunity to have that practical learning experience. And it's not just the formal teaching from their teachers that they're missing out on. They're actually missing the informal learning that they get from learning from their peers. The exchange of information, the exchange of struggles, the identification of this is an interesting part of the curriculum, this is something that excites us. So Minister, really more than ever, these students, the mocks have gone, the orals are uncertain, and what was devastating for them was to see adults and unions withdraw from talks. I'm glad that the talks have resumed. I appreciate that those talks are confidential. But Minister, I really hope you will be able to update the House and the Leaving Cert students who I'm sure will be watching today, who are really anxious for 3 things. They want clarity, they want certainty, and they want choice. And I don't think they're unreasonable demands for the Leaving Cert students of the class of 2021 to be making. And I also would throw into the mix, Minister, if you can, when you're replying, talk about how the applied Leaving Cert is going to be managed, if possible. And if you're in a position, I'd appreciate some comment on the Junior Cert also. Gurmagat Gihirlach.
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
Gurmagat Gihirlach Gurmagat and Seanad as an hour táhachtach seo chur faoi bhrád an Seanad an Jobh agus dáchas orm freagart in onad an ara idicais atá gnóthach faoi láthair agus gohann si a leis scéal bhí mé caint leithí le roinnt nómad deo hin. So to thank the Centre for raising what is obviously a very important matter. It is of interest not only to senators and members of the Dáil, all of us really, but particularly the 60,000 young people across the country who are due to sit the Leaving Cert this year and who are continuing their education, because that's what it is. The Leaving Cert is not an end point, it is a part of their lifelong journey of education. The Minister, I spoke to her, she sent her apologies and she's otherwise engaged, but would like to have been here and has asked me to do this. Government is acutely aware of the challenges which the pandemic has brought to the education system this year and last year, and particularly the unique challenges it poses to those preparing to sit state examinations. For Leaving Cert students, the continued closure of schools for in-school learning does result in these students missing out on significant in-person class contact time. But when I say that, can I also pay tribute to those students and their teachers in particular, who are continuing education despite the difficulties? And I think there has been a huge amount of development in the provision of education. I see that with my own children from the first stage of this pandemic to now. It's never going to be perfect, of course, that's why we're having this discussion. But there have been dramatic changes, and I think that's to everybody's credit in the education system. Planning for the 2021 Leaving Cert is underway, as we know, by the Department and the State Exams Commission, crucially. It's obviously recognised that a flexible and agile approach is necessary in light of the fast-moving changes linked to COVID-19. But the welfare of students and their families is front and centre in all decision-making. So the planning work underway is being helped by an advisory group of key stakeholders. This obviously includes students, most importantly, parents, teachers, school leadership management bodies, the State Exams Commission, the NCCA, the Department of Further and Higher Education, crucially too, Higher Education Authority and the Department of Education, obviously including NEPS, the National Education Psychological Service. The advisory group has met on a number of occasions, and a subgroup has formed to consider in depth the issues towards planning the 2021 exams, including those particularly identified by the ISSU in their recently published report on the 2021 state examinations and return to school. And I want to pay tribute to the ISSU for their key and central role in planning and their strength of voice on behalf of their members as well. The Department of Education has indicated to the education partners that any corresponding process will need to include the following features. The State Exams Commission has to run the examinations and the corresponding processes, and this was obviously an issue last year, and the Department wants to address that. There needs to be better provision, obviously, for out-of-school learners in the corresponding process. We all saw this last year too. Some cognizance, of course, of performance and additional component elements of exams, such as coursework, orals, practicals, etc. And, of course, timely progression to higher and further education using either exams or the outcome of any corresponding process. So bilateral meetings began and continued last weekend and the weekend just gone by, and the discussions continue today. It is worth noting that in other jurisdictions where state exams have been cancelled, I understand there is further work to be done to clarify what's intended. This is natural as well. We're in an unprecedented situation. So in England, for example, a consultation process on possible arrangements closed on 29th of January, and feedback from that is now being considered. Ofqual in England has stated there are no straightforward options for how exams are to be replaced, and I think we can all agree on that. And the best we can do is work and sit together, all of us talk, to ensure we get the best possible solution for our students. The government, of course, is focused on identifying a solution for the students who are due to sit the Leaving Cert this year, including the applied Leaving Certificate. The priority afforded to education by the government has been clear throughout, with the Minister and officials working with the partners to reopen schools safely and also to identify the best way forward for the Leaving Cert class of 2021. As senators will be aware, one of the partners withdrew from the process last week. However, following engagements with the ASTI, the Minister for Education is very happy that the ASTI has returned to discussions over the weekend. I think everybody will welcome that. The Minister has publicly welcomed it, and they return now to confidential discussions with everybody else regarding the 2021 exams. And we do note their willingness to engage on the agenda that has already been set out in this process. The Minister has thanked the TUI as well, parent bodies, the student body, as I've said already, represented by the ISSU, and the managerial bodies who help run our schools for their constructive engagement. That continued over the weekend, is resuming this morning, and the issues are continuing to be worked out. So intensive engagement is continuing with the education stakeholders to advance progress and provide certainty and clarity at the earliest possible time. I understand from the Minister, she has told me that it is hoped that students will receive this clarity in the coming days, but that's subject to ongoing engagement with all of the education stakeholders. And I note the comments you made about the junior cert, and I think the Minister in due course, I think, will address that issue, but I don't have an answer for you today on that. But I think clearly we all agree that the Leaving Cert is the critical issue today.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Senators, for allowing a longer reply, but I think it's an important issue. Senator, you have 1 minute.
I have
1 minute.
1 minute. Minister, thank you for your reply, and thanks, as I said, for coming in. A flexible and agile approach that puts the welfare of students as a priority is obviously welcome, and we all support it. Have to say, Minister, though, it is disappointing that the department didn't provide more information to this House, and it is really disappointing that I suppose the Sunday papers seem to carry more detail than this House is being informed by the department, and I don't think that is appropriate either for the students. It's not fair on them, or I don't think it is appropriate for this House to be treated in that way. And I would ask, Minister, that when you return, I thank you for coming in here today, but that when you go back to Cabinet and you go back to the Department of Education from this House, please tell them that we want clarity and certainty and choice for the students of the class of 2021. And we would appreciate if the Minister herself could make time to come to the House at the earliest opportunity, accepting that there isn't, it isn't fair or appropriate to put an arbitrary timeline on it, but at the very earliest opportunity she would return to this House and update the House in detail on the arrangements that are being put in place.
Minister, for 1 minute.
Yeah, I have no difficulty in passing on that message to the Minister in any way. In terms of what's in the Sunday papers, what I do know is that talks still continue today. So clearly what would have been in the papers at the weekend, I don't know its provenance, but it certainly can't be the final answer, because the talks continue and that work hasn't completed. I would like to say, though, finally, Cathaoirleach, and sorry for taking up so much time, the Minister attached this Oireachtas Young to me, and I'm glad that you've done that. It's a few years since I did the Leaving Cert myself, but certainly what I would say is the big difference now from even then, and probably even from more recently as well, is the voice of the student is there at the table. Not just at the table, but also in the public realm as well, in the media. I think taken very, very seriously, actually. And I think that's a major change. And I want to compliment the ISSU for the work that they're doing, because up to now, when there was an education issue, rightly the teachers' trade unions take centre stage, and that will always be the case, I've no doubt, because they're key partners in education. But now more and more, and we saw this last year and we see it this year, the voice of the student through the ISSU is very prominent in the public media, in the private discussions, and ultimately in what the solution to this will be. And I want to compliment them and encourage all students to support that organisation and to get involved. I think it's really, really important, and is a huge and welcome change to the debate.
Thank you.